All right. Uh, Good whatever. AP or anatomy and physiology whenever you watch this, but this is gonna be the presentation over blood, which will be our next chapter. We're gonna do blood and then the heart and cardiovascular systems, probably about 2 or 3 weeks. So functions of blood. Essentially, the function of blood is like to deliver nutrients, transport waste, transport hormones, which we talked about previously. We talked about endocrine system, helps maintain your body temperature, helps maintain your pH, these things called buffers, maintains your fluid volume, prevents blood loss and clotting, and also prevents infection. So we'll talk about some of these. So when we talk about blood, we need to talk about the components. So plasma is about 55% of your blood, which is 90% water. You got ions, proteins, gases, nutrients, and waste in there. And then cells, which are about 45%, are RBCs, which are red blood cells. You get your white blood cells, platelets. And when we talk about the cells, they develop from stem cells in the bone marrow, and that's why when you sometimes hear about bone marrow transplants, here's a graph or a graphical representation. You can pause it and look at that on your own. So we talk about how blood cells are made. Hematopoiesis, this is blood cell formation. You see hema, that often refers to blood. It does occur in the red bone marrow, which we talked about. We did skeletal system and the spongy bone. And places where you're going to see a lot of red blood cell formation are things like the skull, the pelvis, the ribs, your sternum, humerus, a lot of those flat bones. And so we talk about specific types of blood cells. We talk about erythrocytes, and these are the RBCs, and these are the ones that transport oxygen in the blood. They're shaped like a biconcave disc, and so it looks like a donut. So if you can see in that image there, you can kind of see where there's like a little divot. Anucleate, no nucleus, and then the main protein, or one of the important proteins, is hemoglobin or hemoglobin, however you want to say it. And this binds to oxygen, and so your blood cells have a lifespan of about 100 to 120 days. It's not like I'm not saying that every one of your blood cells in your body gets replaced every 120 so they're not all the same age is what I'm saying. So you might have some blood cells that are 50 days old, some that are 100, some that are 120, but that's about the general lifespan. We talk about red blood cells. We do need to talk about some of the disorders. One of them being anemia. And what anemia is, it's a decrease in oxygen carrying ability. And usually, what happens in anemia, you have a low red blood cell count, or you're deficient in hemoglobin content. And there's also a thing called sickle cell disease, which is abnormal hemoglobin. And that's where that's the sickle shape, like a half moon. That's a genetic disorder. And what happens in sickle cell, it's genetic, and usually carriers of sickle cell, they have one allele, but it makes it resistant to malaria in Africa. And you may have learned about that in biology when we taught. There's a thing called heterozygote advantage. So there's just a correlation between sickle cell allele and malaria. You can kind of pause this. Leukocytes, these are your white blood cells or WBCs, and these defend the body against infection and tumors. And so they locate areas of tissue damage by responding to these chemicals. So this chemical signal gets sent out. And there's different types. There's neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils, lymphocytes, monocytes. These are different types of white blood cells. But when we talk about a disorder of the blood, we need to talk about leukemia. And in leukemia, the bone marrow becomes cancerous. So there's huge numbers of white blood cells, but they may not be doing their function. And so their treatment can be chemotherapy, radiation, stem cell transplants. And so with leukemia, again, that's when the function of the cell has been disrupted because of cancer. Let's talk about platelets now. These are cell fragments. These are irregularly shaped bodies, and they tend to be red blood cells that have broken up, and these are needed for clotting. And so we talk about clotting, hemostasis, that's the stoppage of bleeding, which would be a positive feedback mechanism. And these are basically the three steps. You have vascular spasm. This is where they constrict the blood vessels that are damaged. You get a platelet plug that forms. The platelets stick and they bind to the damaged sites, and they release a chemical to attract more platelets. And then you have coagulation, which is blood clotting. And fibrin or fibrin these are threads. It forms like a net. And so usually, if you get cut, the blood clot should be happening within 3 to 6 minutes. So here's an image again you can pause and look at. Another one. Let's talk about some disorders. You've got a thrombus, embolus, and hemophilia. So a thrombus is a clot in an unbroken blood vessel. So for example, a coronary thrombus is a heart attack. And so blood clot occurs for whatever reason. And then an embolus or an embolism, this is a thrombus that breaks away and it floats. So cerebral embolus or cerebral embolism is a stroke. And what happened is a blood vessel, or excuse me, a blood clot in another part of the body has traveled to the brain essentially and can lead to a cerebral embolism or stroke. And then hemophilia, that's a hereditary bleeding disorder. It's a lack of clotting factors. It tends to be sex linked. Males tend to have issues with hemophilia more than females. Let's talk about blood typing now. So when we talk about blood, we need to talk about human blood groups. We have antigens, antibodies, agglutination, and RBC surface proteins. So an antigen is a foreign substance that the immune system recognizes. So we'll talk about this more in class. Antibodies are these Y-shaped proteins secreted by white blood cells that attach to antigens, and these kind of help your immune system fight off an infection. Agglutination is clumping caused by these antibodies. So these antibodies will cause it to clump together. And what really determines the clumping and what kind of antibodies will be produced for these things, there's an A antigen, a B antigen, and an RH antigen. So when we talk about our ABO blood groups, so these are the percentages. So type A, type B, type A, B, and O. As you can see on the surface, type A has A antigen, type B has B antigen, AB has both, O has none. And that's why O is the universal donor, because anybody can take O blood, because no one is the immune system is not going to be prepped, or there's nothing for the immune system to react to. AB is the universal receiver because they can receive all types. So as I said, A has A antigen, B antigen, AB both, and O has none. And so RH is a antigen found on the RBCs. It's also found in a rhesus monkey in about 1940. They figured that out. And so if you're like O positive, you have no A or B antigen, but you have the RH antigen. If you're Rh negative, right, you don't have the Rh factor. And so these are just showing you blood groups, antibodies present, antigens present. So there's a blood typing game we may do in class. I might show you some demos. But here's how when blood type is being tested. So type AB will clump in both. So if I have the materials, we'll see if I can, it might be easier just to do this as a demo, but we'll see. And I think those of you that had me for honors bio, we did do this. Those of you did not have me for biology, we'll try to figure it out. So type AB, it'll clump in both. Type A will only clump in anti-A, not in B. Type B contains B antigen, so it'll not clump in A, but clump in B, and then type O has no clumping. So blood typing analysts, blood samples mixed with 3 antibodies. If blood clumps, antigens present. If no clumps, no antigens are present. So there you go. And so what's your blood type? So anyways, that was, 7 minutes of getting you ready for blood typing. So anyways, we will do this for a couple days. I've got a couple activities to do, and we'll look at blood types. So again, this was just to kind of give you a quick preview of probably what we're going to be doing next week. If you got any questions, let me know. But I will see you hopefully Tuesday or whenever you watch this, and we'll be ready for another video presentation over the heart here in a week or so.